Some leaders talk about peace. Others push for democratic reforms. I promise nothing but an iron fist and maybe a McDonald's on every corner, though, who became the next president of Sordland. After years of maneuvering within the USP, I finally rose to the top. With the economy sliding into recession, I advised Alfonso that it was time to step aside and let someone else take the reins. And with Alfonso out of the picture, the path was finally clear for Anton Rayne to seize the mantle of leadership over a nation in turmoil.
Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
But every president with dreams of a cult of personality needs the right look. So I went with a fancy white hat, a villainous mustache, and a fat pipe dangling off Anton's lips. The moment has come to chart the course of my new administration. For the economy, I chose to make the bourgeoisie proud by promoting a free market system. In geopolitics, the choice was clear. I needed the backing of Western powers to get McDonald's on every corner and keep the masses happy while I centralized control. And as for my political agenda, it could only be one thing: strengthening the military, as any self-respecting strongman would. Now it's time for my grand speech to the nation, where I'll promise them the world before quietly slipping away to set my schemes into motion. I meet with my vice president and old friend, Peter Vectern, along with Lucien Gallade, my chief political strategist, to start drafting our game plan. After the recent election, my party controls 130 of the 250 seats in the Grand National Assembly, Sordland's main legislative body. But to overturn the old order and rewrite the constitution, I'll need a 2/3 majority or 166 votes. And because Sordland is a dysfunctional state, I also need at least 6 of the 11 Supreme Court justices on my side as well. It's going to take a lot of wheeling and dealing, but if I want to impose my vision, rein in the other branches of government, and strengthen my executive powers, it's the only path forward. But beyond the legal shenanigans, the people expect President Rayne to fix the economy. I meet with my cabinet, and they don't sugarcoat it. Things are grim. Sordland is stuck in a recession thanks to the last administration. Our debt is larger than our GDP, unemployment is sitting at a brutal 16%, and inflation is running hot at 10%. In short, I've got my work cut out for me, and without drastic action, the country is doomed. So I decided to throw caution to the wind and embrace a free market economy, for the good of the people, of course. But before I hitch Sordland's future to the stock market, my first order of business is fixing our crumbling infrastructure. I decided to invest in a mega infrastructure project, which takes 1 government budget away, leaving me with 6 left. I'm given a choice: build a new highway or invest in high-speed rail. I ended up picking the railway as it seems to please my capitalist-friendly ministers, and it also links the capital Holsword with the economic powerhouse of Lackhaven, making it a prime target for investment. And speaking of investments, a wealthy oligarch named Walter Tusk waltzes into my office, and we start talking private business. And by private business, I of course mean shady insider deals. One of the underrated perks of holding office is how often people try to bribe you, and this one is textbook cronyism, where I hand the railway contract to Underhaul Construction, a company that Mr. Tusk holds a major stake in. A pretty profitable arrangement that also puts me in the good books of the corporate elites. I also make time to bail out big business instead of the people in need, as part of my economic relief plan. This act of patronage cost me 2 budget points, leaving only 4 in the tank. But I'm a big believer in trickle-down economics, and that my voters will thank me in the long run. While on the subject of gratitude, it's time to put my money where my mouth is and award the contract to Underhaul Construction, draining my government's budget all the way down to 2. One of the big reasons I agreed to this corrupt deal is to get the oligarch faction on my side. That way, they'll pump money into the Swordish economy and hopefully twist a few arms in the Assembly and Supreme Court when it's time to vote on my new constitution, because it's going to face some serious headwinds. Lucien has now finished preparing the draft of what our constitutional reforms will look like, and Nia Morgna, my Minister of Justice and Law, is not happy that we are deciding the future of Sordland without her. The reformists in the Assembly want the President's absolute veto powers to be removed or limited, but Lucien has the brilliant idea to create a loophole where the President can ignore a bill indefinitely as a way of killing it without a veto, effectively preserving the President's control over legislation. Nia isn't exactly a fan of my grand vision for Sordland. She calls it a blueprint for tyranny and storms out of the meeting. It's a shame, since Nia also happens to sit on the Supreme Court, which means she and the other reformists will likely vote against my constitution. But now isn't the time to go soft. I press on with Lucien and Peter, plotting ways to break the judiciary's iron grip on Swordish politics. Right now, the Supreme Court can impeach the president alone, which is dangerous, given that there are 5 old guard justices who will use every trick in the book to bring Anton Rayne down. My solution to this conundrum is to give the Assembly a role in the impeachment process, but only if they muster an absolute majority. In other words, as long as I control the Assembly, I'm basically impeachment-proof. Now, it's time to hammer out the final draft of my constitutional reforms. First, I'll seemingly curtail the president's veto powers, but slip in a handy loophole that basically lets me keep my absolute veto. Next, I'll cut the Supreme Court out of the amendment process entirely, making it much easier to change the Constitution in the future. Third, I'll overhaul impeachment so that both the Assembly and the Court need a majority to remove the president, which makes me pretty much untouchable as long as I control the Assembly. Section 4 covers minister appointments. They'll now require a confidence vote from the Assembly, a little concession to win over the right-wing nationalists. I'll keep the 10% electoral threshold to stop my conservative allies from grumbling. I'll also strengthen my presidential decrees, making my executive orders trump statute law and preventing any form of judicial review. To balance out all of this power grabbing, I'll toss in a 2-term limit to keep the liberals happy. I'll strip the Supreme Court of its absolute immunity as well, letting the Assembly impeach justices, giving me some control over the judiciary. And for the grand finale, I'll remove immunity from Colonel Tarkin Soule himself, the man who wrote the old Constitution, because something tells me he won't be thrilled about the changes I'm cooking up. Another key part of running the country is setting the term budget, which will determine the ministries that get fat sacks of cash and which ones will have to tighten their belts. Naturally, I'm laser focused on tightening my grip on Sordland, so I pump more money into law enforcement and the military, ministries that will be critical in my machinations. To cover the costs, I slash funding for both education and public health, because who needs smart or healthy citizens when you've got tanks and tear gas? Besides, a dumber and sicker population is way easier to keep in line.
You're goddamn right.
The allocation of funds is now complete, which puts me into debt at -1 government budget. Deficit spending might be frowned upon by economists, but if the real world has taught me anything, it's that you can always spend your way out of a recession, and when that fails, just flip on the money printer and hope nobody notices. With the economy already nosediving, I don't have time to worry about little luxuries like workers' rights, so I veto a bill for minimum wage and overtime pay because cheap, exploitable labor is actually a good thing for a developing nation. Instead, I blow 2 more government budget points on a regional investment in Lorraine because it's got coal mines, and low-cost energy prices are much more important for regime stability than workers' rights. But another great way to consolidate power in the hands of a despot is to create a secret state police force. Their job is to keep the peace, by which I mean cracking down on pesky dissidents, annoying activists, and inconvenient minorities. In Sordland, the enemy within can be just as dangerous as the nations on our borders. That's why tapping telephones to catch them in the act of bad-mouthing the president is a very necessary feature of my administration.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
However, none of my grand plans matter if I don't fix the economy, which is currently limping along at -3 government budget, so I'm in deep debt. Luckily, I've discovered a clever solution through education. After gutting its funding, our schools are already falling apart, so why not finish the job and privatize the whole sector? Sure, the youth get screwed, but I free up +1 government budget, which is what I call efficiency.
And how can you not make money with such a brilliant idea?
After wrapping up with the Minister of Education, I sat down with the aptly named Gloria Tory, leader of the Conservatives and moderate factions of my party, and someone I absolutely need on my side if I want to hit 166 votes in the Assembly. I pitched my reforms as being for the good of Sordland democracy, reassured her I wouldn't prosecute Colonel Soule after stripping away his immunity, and spun the idea of gutting judicial protections as just another way to strengthen the USP's grip on power. Talks dragged on and seemed doomed to stall, but after enduring my endless political monologues, Gloria caved out of sheer exhaustion and agreed to support my constitutional reforms. The only red lines she laid down were privatizing healthcare or the Sordland State Corporation. It's worth noting that Sordland's conservatives prefer a planned economy and aren't exactly pleased about the private sector or free market economics. With the conservatives and moderates on my side, my next stop is Albin Clavin, leader of the Democratic Reformists within the USP. After some back and forth, it becomes obvious he's not really keen about my plan to strengthen presidential decrees above statute law, free from any judicial oversight. He argues it would dismantle the separation of powers.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Personally, I call that efficient government. I try to spin it as a temporary necessity to push through greater reforms later on, but Clavin isn't buying it. Still, I've got cards to play. I dangle a cabinet position to win him over. Unfortunately, he's got his eyes on a bigger prize, the vice presidency. I wasn't about to sell out my old friend Peter, so instead, I waved a big fat check under Clavin's nose, and he seems to appreciate my forwardness.
I feel so alive!
In the end, corruption triumphs as always. Thanks to my little kleptocratic side hustle with Walter Tusk, I was able to dip into my personal wealth to buy Clavin's loyalty and secure his support for my constitutional reforms. One good thing leads to another as I get an offer from the Republic of Arcasia, which is this world's version of America. The leader of the capitalist West wants air-based access in exchange for +2 government budget points in the form of foreign aid. That's money in the bank as far as I'm concerned, and it finally lets me balance the budget and erase the deficit. Nothing warms my heart quite like Western support propping up a friendly dictator. Anyway, it's time to put the secret police to work. Karl Grieser, who now heads the force, has been assembling the most loyal, battle-tested agents to root out the state's enemies. The biggest threats aren't just across the border, they're inside my own halls. Karl suspects Interior Minister Lilius Graf could be dangerous, while Lucian points to the old guard, people like Chief Justice Orso Hawker as the real problem. If we gather enough dirt, we can either quietly remove them, or, once the new constitution is in place, prosecute them under our new rules. Karl has also briefed me that oligarchs like Tusk and Marcel Caronti are mixed up in some shady dealings. They're my buddies though, so I told him not to pursue them. Instead, I ordered Grieser to focus on the old guard, so that we can finally break their hold on the political process and clear the way for our reforms. I also meet with the Minister of Defense, Iosif, and General Kruger. Both are grinning ear to ear after I fatten up their military budget. Which is not just for authoritarian roleplay purposes, it's to prepare for war, given that our neighbor, the Kingdom of Rumburg, is a great power with a habit of eyeing Sordland's border like prime real estate.
Oh no!
They outmatch us in everything: population, economy, and military might, so we're very much the underdog in this standoff. Kruger argues for sheer numbers, while Iosif pushes for a full modernization program. I ended up siding with Iosif, figuring that a smaller but modern military is the only way we stand a fighting chance against a giant. Now all I can do is hope that my shiny new upgrades arrive before Rumburg decides to pay us a not-so-friendly visit. In the great game of geopolitics, weaker nations have to stick together, so I hop on a plane to our northern neighbor, Agnolia, in the hopes of hashing out an agreement. Agnolia is a Western-aligned democracy led by Prime Minister Martin van Hoorten and is eager to talk business, but his eyes are locked on economics. He wants Sordland to buy Agnolian steel at a higher price. I push back, trying to keep the current deal, and ask what else he can want. That's when he brings up Helgeland, a small island off Agnolia's coast, currently contested by the Socialist Republic of Valgsland. Van Hoorten wants me to recognize Agnolia's claim, something the international community has refused to do. I agree, since siding with socialists isn't my style. To my surprise, the trade deal suddenly escalates into something much bigger. The Prime Minister offers a formal military alliance between our nations, not just a defensive pact either. Agnolia is willing to back me up even if I go for an aggressive land grab. Naturally, I shake on it. In a world where Rumburg looms large, having friends with guns feels like a wise investment. Continuing to expand my network of like-minded nations seeking to contain Rumburg, I now travel to the troubled nation of Wehlen. President Victor Smolak, the iron-fisted dictator of Wehlen, greets me with a grand tour of his totalitarian playground. The streets are lined with fearful crowds waving flags under the shadow of a massive statue of Victor himself. One brave soul dares to shout out that Victor is a murderer, only to be quietly disappeared by nearby soldiers. I politely compliment him on his efficiency in his handling of ungrateful citizenry, and our bromance starts to blossom. Eventually, we arrive at his lavish presidential palace, dripping with excess, where Smolak finally sits me down to hammer out some good old-fashioned deals between our two like-minded regimes. We bond over our shared hatred of Rumburg, and Victor lets me in on a little secret. The kingdom has been funneling supplies to the Blutish Freedom Front, or BFF, a militant group fighting to carve out an independent Blutish state from both our countries.
And you're sounding like a separatist.
Victor proposes a joint military operation between our armed forces to wipe out the BFF once and for all, and in exchange I will get a free trade deal, rivers of oil, and a military partner. I didn't even have to think twice about this arrangement, because it's exactly the sort of bargain that I'm looking for, since this kills two birds with one stone. I get to crush the Blutish minority while also strengthening the state of my economy. I quickly shake Victor Smolak's bloody hand and feel relief that I have such an upstanding friend in the autocrat next door. Strongmen leaders are stronger together after all. As I flew back home, it was time to pivot from foreign affairs to domestic scheming. I delivered a rousing speech to the assembly, painting a grand vision of a new Sordland, one united under my leadership and free from the suffocating grip of the Supreme Court. To my delight, the National Front Party, our hard-right nationalists led by Casero Kibner, were more than eager to throw their weight behind the new constitution. After all, nothing excites them more than watching democracy take a few steps backwards.
I love democracy. I love the republic.
After all that political jousting, it was time to shift gears back to the economy, because my shiny new high-speed railway was finally complete. I headed to the capital, Hulsord, to meet with Lucian and my economic ministers so we could collectively pat ourselves on the back for finishing Sordland's first mega infrastructure project on schedule. A miracle by our country's standards. Lucian suggested that we milk the moment for all it's worth by having me drive the inaugural train with the press watching, which sounded perfect for bombarding the public with my administration successes. I cut the ceremonial ribbon with oversized scissors, and just like that, history was made. But the economy is merely a means to an end, the military is my true obsession, and the Minister of Defense wants to discuss more important matters in the modernization efforts of Sordland's armed forces. Iosif tells me that he wants to remove mandatory conscription because all these mass-produced cadets make for poor quality troops that also overstretch our military's logistics and command structure. Iosif argues that all these forcibly conscripted soldiers lack the morale to go on the offense, and we should instead concentrate all of our resources on a much smaller, more nimble force that can outmaneuver a giant like Rumberg, rather than try to match them man for man. It made sense to me, so I ended conscription and set Sordland on the path of a modern volunteer army designed to blitz through Rumberg's front lines instead of bogging us down in attritional warfare. Obviously, this is just harmless theory crafting for deterrence purposes, and keeping the peace is the ultimate goal, of course.
Of course.
Back in the political arena, I sit down with Casero to secure the NFP's backing for my constitutional reforms. My party holds 130 seats, but I need at least 166 to clear the supermajority hurdle, and with the NFP's 40 seats, the math becomes a breeze. Casero is more than happy to play ball. He's thrilled about my partnership with Wehlen against the Blutish militants, and downright giddy about how much power I'm funneling into the presidency. The hard-right nationalists adore me so much that they even propose a formal political alliance. Naturally, I accept. With 170 seats locked in, I now have the assembly eating out of my hand, free to mold Sordland exactly to my liking.
I am the Senate.
Even with my newly consolidated political power, the recession still looms, and there's an economy waiting to be carved up and privatized.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching-gery.
To keep the poor masses employed so that they won't complain, I decide to build an industrial zone in the port city of Conriat. This time, I'm handing the contract to Taurus Holding, an Arcasian firm. My burger-loving friends from the West are gifting me a free manufacturing hub, which is awfully generous of my capitalist patrons. I have to say, it's nice that all my diplomatic sweet talk is paying off, and even nicer that they're politely ignoring my steady slide into authoritarianism. But even with all of this foreign aid, my government budget is barely staying afloat, and if I want to revolutionize the economy, I'll need more cash in the coffers. So I march over to the Ministry of Economy to see what the policy wonks can conjure up. They suggest that we privatize the Swordfish State Corporation and the Nadam Mining Group. The problem is, Gloria Tori already warned me that the Conservatives would riot if I touched their precious state-run construction company, and losing their support means my constitution will never pass the assembly. So I thread the needle, keep the SSC public, and toss Nadam to the wolves of the free market. Naturally, the oligarchs smell blood in the water, and not too long after, Marcel Caranti and Walter Tusk line up to shower me with fancy bribes. Tusk offers his network of corruption to secure my re-election, while Caranti dangles the keys to the biggest media empire in the country. Not wanting to spark an oligarch cage match, I take the middle road, split Nadam's shares right down the middle using the power of insider trading. Everyone leaves happy, and I get to pretend that this was a heartwarming story about the power of compromise and friendship. After all my lobbying, backroom deals, and generous investments, the moment of truth finally arrives. I roll up to the Grand National Assembly in the presidential car, where the vote on my constitutional reforms is about to take place. My driver, Serge, decides to ruin the mood by telling me that Tarkin's soul has been spotted in the capital. That's bad news. The military strongman who wrote the current constitution and founded my party still casts a long shadow. I'm not sure if he's going to show up, but if he does, he probably won't like the changes I'm cooking up, and will use his influence to sway conservative loyalists against me. Inside the assembly, the members prepare to cast their votes. I shout my slogans, tell everyone to vote yes, and head down to cast my own ballot. Lucian rushes over, confirming that Sol is in the building, no doubt planning to stir up trouble. Lucian suggests that we speed up the voting process before the old man can rally support for his cause. Fortunately, Gloria Tori, the Speaker of the Assembly, is more than happy to oblige. As the vote proceeds, I spot Albin Clavin dragging his feet, but apparently the check I waved under his nose earlier did its job, because his block follows him into the yes camp. I meet up with Peter, and we both hold our breath as Gloria tallies the final results. 225 ayes and 26 nays, a historic landslide. The assembly has spoken, my reforms pass without a hitch, and the only thing left between me and unchecked power is the Supreme Court. There are 11 justices in the Supreme Court, and I need at least 6 to sign off on my reforms to lock in the new constitution. To get there, I rope in Nia, my justice minister, who despises the whole project but grudgingly agrees to set up a dinner with Justice Isabel Edmonds, the leader of the centrist bloc within the Supreme Court. Nia reminds me that she'll be voting against me, clearly hoping I crash and burn in the court. but I'm here to prove that the reformists will not be able to stop my ascent. Isabel arrives and orders a salad, and thanks to a tip from my intelligence agency, I know the only way to sway her is to mirror her choices, so I find myself gnawing on a pile of leafy greens while delivering a heartful monologue on democracy, the rule of law, and checks and balances, all the things I plan to bend out of shape once I'm in charge. I hammer home the idea that my amendments are the only way to finally break free from the old guard's chokehold on Swordish politics. To my relief, Isabel's centrist brain finds this all very convincing, and she agrees to back my reforms. That's 3 down, 3 to go. My ultra-conservative ally Casero has also been working the phones, and he manages to line up a private meeting with Justice Heron Garassi, a card-carrying member of the Old Guard, but apparently not above persuasion. It doesn't take long for Garassi to show his hand. He's got ambitions. He offers to back my reforms if I promise to make him Chief Justice after we impeach Orso Hawker under the new constitution. On paper, that would give me a sympathetic ally running the court, but in reality, Garassi is still a soulist at heart and far too corrupt to trust with a top job. So instead, I take the path of least resistance. I slide him a thick envelope of cash, the same way I handled Albin Clavin in the assembly. Garassi flashes a greedy smile, takes the bribe, and promises to fetch me some votes in the court. Honestly, I respect guys like Garassi, quick, transactional, and no salads involved. Time rolls on, and the fateful day finally arrives. The Supreme Court has reached a decision on whether or not Sordland is getting a new constitution. Lucian bursts into my office and delivers the verdict. 7 of the 11 justices have voted in favor, and just like that, the old order is broken. The Supreme Court's independence is officially on life support, and as president, I can't wait to take my new executive powers out for a test drive. With the power that I now legally wield, I tell the cabinet to marshal our parliamentary majority against Chief Justice Orso Hawker. The old guard stalwart has been a thorn in my side for too long. Soon, he'll be a cautionary example to anyone who dares oppose me. And then there's Tarkin Sol, the man who once saved the country, but then also tried to derail my plans in the assembly. He made an enemy of me that day, and I fully intend to settle the score. After the cabinet meeting, Carl Greaser, head of the secret police, pulls me aside with some good news. He's turned up dirt on Chief Justice Orso Hawker. Apparently, Hawker has been deep in corruption and lobbying, ironically the same hobbies I enjoy, except I'm the president, so I get a pass. With the new constitution stripping justices of their absolute immunity, this is exactly the leverage that we need. I tell Carl to prepare the case and make it stick. The first domino begins to fall, as Lucian tells me that the assembly is pushing for Orso Hawker's impeachment and has already dismissed him from his office. With Hawker out, the Supreme Court must now choose a new Chief Justice. Lucian makes a comment that would get him cancelled before warning me that Heron Garassi, the old guard justice that I previously bribed, is the obvious frontrunner if we don't intervene. Fortunately, my new constitution gives me influence over appointing Hawker's replacement, and I pick Ovid Gresher, the most experienced judge out of all the other candidates, and our best shot at stopping Garassi from taking the top job. Gresher is a centrist too, which means if I build a strong criminal case against Tarkin Sol, he might be willing to indict the old war hero. With the Supreme Court remodeled to my taste, it was now time to wield my strengthened presidential decrees. I have 3 decrees that I get to enact, so I must choose carefully. First, I decide to mimic my freedom-loving friends in Arcasia and grant the right to bear arms to kickstart our own military-industrial complex. Second, I reinstate capital punishment to clear out the prisons of undesirables. And third, I establish the Supreme Council for Sordis Radio and Television, a handy little agency to rein in the media and keep the public focused on the proper enemies, like Rumberg abroad, rather than awkward topics like human rights or censorship at home. But even as I consolidate unchecked power, my administration is starting to buckle under scandal. Peter is getting divorced after his wife discovered his affair with our secretary, Livia Suno. Not a great look when the vice president is enjoying himself a little bit too much in the office. As I weigh how to contain the fallout, Lucian walks in with something even worse. He suspects Livia is a Rumbergian spy. A whistleblower tipped him off about a mole in the palace, and the audio tapes he plays for me are quite concerning. Peter was definitely fooling around in the presidential office, and Livia was pillow-talking him into giving up state secrets. When Livia herself shows up with my coffee, we sit her down for an impromptu interrogation. She parries every accusation with airtight alibis, but before long, Peter storms in, furious that Lucian was wiretapping him. Things were quickly spiraling out of control, and I decided to speak to Lucian alone, where I told him to proceed with the investigation into Livia Suno in secret, while I placated the adulterous duo by telling them that this was just a misunderstanding.
Misinput, calm down! You calm the fuck down!
A few days later, Lucian came back with a report, and it was exactly as we feared. Livia Suno wasn't Livia at all, but Ilana Vance, a deep cover agent working for Rumberg. Peter skipped the proper vetting process because she's hot, and now it's my mess to clean up. Luckily, I've got options. I order the secret state police to deal with Vance permanently, and Lucian assures me it will be handled by day's end. But one thing that can't be fixed is my polling numbers. They're atrocious. Peter warns me that conservative support has cratered, liberals despise me, and the socialists never did care for me. The only reliable cheerleaders I have left are the nationalists, but they alone are not enough to win me the vote. Lucian suggests that we win over the undecided by fixing the economy, but my boy Peter has an even better idea. It's time to start a war. If I return as a victorious war hero, I'll be written into the history books and practically guaranteed a second term.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
And that's why Peter is my vice president, always the man with a plan. But if I want to win, I need a seriously beefy wartime economy, and this is where the arsenal of democracy lends its helping hand. Arcasia has offered massive military investments to expand our military-industrial complex, and I happily accept my top dog-eating benefactor's generous check. That frees up my mega infrastructure project to pivot into the automotive industry, which will hopefully provide enough jobs to make people not want to riot in the streets. Everything is now set. There is no turning back now, as I head into the final chapter of my Suzerain campaign. Chapter 4 kicks off with an urgent midnight call from the Ministry of Defense. I race to the war room to find my foreign minister squabbling with the military brass. General Kruger tells us that 20 minutes earlier, Rumberg shot down one of our planes with the pilot killed in action, and the aircraft was well inside our own airspace when the anti-air guns opened up. The generals want revenge to avoid looking weak, but David and Lucian plead for de-escalation and a path towards peace. But you know what? Peace is for amateurs, and this is exactly the pretext that I need to rally the country around me and save myself in the upcoming elections. It is time to fire up the Swordish war machine and prepare to strike back at Rumberg. But before I go on foreign adventures, I need to finish off the last vestiges of the old guard. With Orso Hawker out and my constitutional changes now in place, the time has come for the trial of the century. Tarkin Sol, the charismatic colonel who ended the chaos of the Swordish Civil War and founded the political party I now lead, is sitting in a courthouse awaiting the new Chief Justice's verdict. The former colonel stands accused of crimes against the state and the people of Sordland during his tenure in office. Ovid Gresher delivers the final judgment, and Tarkin Sol is found guilty.
Hasta la vista, baby.
He is sentenced to death by execution because one of my presidential decrees reinstated capital punishment. Sol bitterly tells me that I will not be remembered in the history books, but little did he know that I was about to plunge our nation into an existential struggle against a nuclear superpower. One way or another, Anton Rayne will be remembered. Fresh off vanquishing my political rival, I finally get to bask in the glow of my capitalist triumphs. The economy is soaring like Nvidia's stock chart, and Sordland has officially clawed its way out of a recession. Under my enlightened rule, inflation has plummeted from 10% to a historic low of 2%, while the economy has grown by 16% in just 4 years. It seems the invisible hand of the free market is giving me a well-deserved thumbs up. Back home, David and I sat down and recapped everything we'd achieved together and the choices we've made to get here. He tells me locals are whispering that I'm building a post-Solus dictatorship, that I'm a true authoritarian. And you know what? They're not wrong. I'm a proud authoritarian, and I'm prepared for war.
It's just good business.
I return to the Ministry of Defense to finalize our war plans to crush Rumberg. In order for any military campaign to go smoothly, it needs a kick-ass title, like Operation Iraqi Freedom, so our invasion will be dubbed Operation Fallen Crown. Our goal is the complete capitulation of the monarchy, but this will not be easy. Rumberg has a 5-to-1 advantage in manpower. They have 2 times our air force and boasts a superior navy. If we do not seize their key hubs, we'll be ground down in an attritional war where we have no hopes of winning. Our strategic objectives will be Rumberg's capital of Thornburg, where the enemy queen resides, and Sarsburg, the vital rail hub that links Rumberg's logistics. Take those and you break their backbone. Fail and they will overpower us. Fortunately, my allies of Wehlen and Agnolia have opened up lines of communication, and all 3 of our nations will be together in this fight against the Goliath of Rumberg. For the opening phase, we'll execute a pincer attack with our allies playing a support role. Swordish forces will feint an assault, then fall back to Estord, baiting Rumberg into a frontal charge against our defensive lines, where Swordish flank forces will be lying in wait to hit them from 3 sides. After we shatter the field army, we push for Sarsburg to sever the rail network and open the way to further targets. After Sarsburg is taken, the enemy will be in disarray, and we will use this opportunity to march straight to their capital of Thornburg, ending this war decisively. Agnolia will also try to retake their previously annexed city of Dome, but my generals think they will fail by themselves, so I send Wehlen's forces over to assist them. With the plan set, I sign the executive order to mobilize the Swordish army and launch Operation Fallen Crown. Back in the capital, I formally declare that we are in a state of war with the Kingdom of Rumberg. There's no turning back now. The die is cast.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
The war was savage, bloody, and filled with sorrow. Or at least that's what I'm told. I actually have no idea. Anton Rayne was too busy enjoying his champagne while my soldiers died for me on the front lines. But the iron dice favors me this day, as the papers crowned me Conqueror Rayne, which has a nice ring to it. They say that no plan survives contact with the enemy, but I guess my plans were just built different. The pincer attack caught Rumburg flat-footed, and the Swordish forces blitzed through their ranks, rapidly marching towards their capital. This all culminated in the siege of Thornburg, which broke Rumburg's back, forcing the queen into a full and unconditional surrender. I also got a letter from my son, who I sent to the front lines, and he's kind of traumatized from the whole ordeal, but I like to think that it put some hair on his chest. I stepped off the presidential train, flanked by Prime Minister Van Horten of Agnolia and President Smolak of Wehlen, both in high spirits. But someone who wasn't in a good mood was Beatrice Livingston, Queen of Rumburg, who sourly greeted my party of victorious warmongers as I laid out the conditions of surrender. The Treaty of Estord demands 4 major concessions: financial reparations for any losses and damages incurred, even though I declared the war.
I like money.
Sordland's annexation of Salzburg, Agnolia's reclamation of Dome, and lastly, Wehlen's annexation of Datefort and its surrounding territories that contain ethnic Wessex. It always feels good to carve up your next door neighbor's land, although Queen Livingston would probably disagree. She angrily scribbles her signature on the papers, and the rest is history. But before she could walk away, I needed to title drop the name of the game and told the queen to never forget who her suzerain is. I return to the capital and deliver a triumphant victory speech, turning battlefield glory and new borders into campaign rhetoric. Millions flood the polls in a record turnout, and with my nationalist coalition at my back, I sweep into a second term. 4 more years of Anton Rayne, enough time to consolidate executive powers, reshape Sordland in my image, and ensure history remembers me as the best president that this country will ever see. Thanks so much for watching. This was a bit different from the games I usually play, but I really enjoyed my time with Tropico Games Suzerain, and wanted to share the experience in my usual edited style. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more games like this on the channel, or if you want to see a different genre. And if you made it all the way to the end, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means a lot to me. Thank you. As always, I hope to see you all next time, but until then, goodbye for now.